Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is my favorite book to film adaptations video. So books are my first love. They will always have a very special place in my heart, but I am also a bit of a cinephile, especially when it comes to classic movies from the 1930s through to the 1960s, just about. And one of the things that I really love, and which marries my love of books and movies, is to watch film adaptations and to compare and contrast these two forms, to try to understand why the choices that were made were ultimately made, and in some cases trash those choices. Let's be real. But I did want to talk about the film adaptations of some books that I really enjoyed. This is on books that I have read and movies that I have seen, obviously, so why don't we dive right in. The first movie is going to come as a surprise to none of my OG subscribers because I talk about this book all the time and I've spoken about the movie. It's Rebecca, and this is based on a novel by Daphne du Maurier. Now, I'm not talking about the Netflix adaptation that came out in 2020. That one is okay if you just want like a pretty romantic period like drama, but the only thing that I feel like that adaptation got right was casting Kristen Scott Thomas as Mrs. Danvers. Like, that was it. That was an impeccable choice, but everything else is a little questionable. But if you want to see this book as a movie, I would recommend the 1940 version, which is in black and white, but was directed by Alfred Hitchcock and starred Sir Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine. Now, this is like chef's kiss for me. This captured the very essence of the book, in my opinion. It is a gothic novel, and it is a suspense. Like, there is this atmosphere and building of suspense and this tension between the two Mrs. De Winters. So in the book, the main character is this young woman who marries Maxim De Winter, who was formerly a widower, and she's haunted by the presence of this first wife at their home. That tension between these two De Winters is really, really crucial, as is this gothic atmosphere, as is the suspense element. And it's no surprise that the master of suspense himself did this justice. It is really, really good. It is a great classic film. If you're ever looking for a black and white film to start you off on that journey, I highly recommend it, but it's up there with like some of my favorite films of all time. The next movie is Atonement, which is based on the book by Ian McEwan, and I only read this book in March, but it was really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is the story of this very precocious, like, preteen / teenager who thinks she sees something, tells the grown-ups in her life about it, and what she reveals ends up ruining lives. And so it is very much a book and a movie about betrayal and guilt, and there is a strong romantic story within it as well. And I had seen the movie for the first time years ago, so I went into the book knowing what was going on, but I feel like this adaptation was really true to the source text. And I say that because as I was reading this book, I could visualize in my mind's eyes certain scenes from the movie and how they played out, and how what I was reading was nearly identical to what was put on the big screen. So that, to me, deserves all sorts of accolades and praise. It's also just a beautifully, like, filmed movie. The sets and the costumes are very lush. The acting is phenomenal, where you have James McAvoy, Keira Knightley, and a young Saoirse Ronan, and it it was just great. That movie is lovely, and from what I remember, it's been a while, but there were these interesting segments where the film was trying to create a visual representation of this stream of consciousness, and those just felt like nice touches as well. So very much enjoyed that movie, as did quite a few other people, I suspect. Next is The English Patient, which is based on the novel by Michael Ondaatje, and I feel like both the novel and the movie are probably a bit of a Marmite selection here, but the book is one of my favorite books of all time, and the movie also has a very special place in my heart. It is a World War II period piece, and in it you kind of have this motley crew of individuals from all sorts of different backgrounds who are forced to coexist in this Italian villa during the Italian campaign of World War II, and they're all orbiting around this mysterious figure, this English patient who is a man who sustained very severe burns and is in the last few days of his life, and he's beginning to recollect what happened to him before this horrible accident that has left him in this state. And both the book and the film are very powerful, very emotional. This is a book that I ugly sobbed through. I ugly sobbed through the movie as well. I mean, like, hyperventilating types of, like, crying. It like hit me that hard. It's very sensual. The affair that is described in the book is one of the most sensual and stunning relationships that I've seen. Ralph Fiennes and Kristen Scott Thomas, the chemistry on screen is just like wow, wow, wow. It's beautifully filmed, the settings are gorgeous, and I just really love this movie. It's the sort of movie that when I feel like I need a good cry, I put this on, because without a doubt I will cry. But as I said, it is a bit of a Marmite sort of movie. It's very complex because the book itself is very complex with how it links these individuals from all these different backgrounds, and some of those connections are fairly tenuous, admittedly, but in my opinion, it's just a phenomenal movie. And yeah, that's all I got. Next is Little Women, and when I talk about Little Women, I'm talking either the 1994 version, which had Winona Ryder, Kristen Dunst, Claire Danes, and Susan Sarandon, or the 2019 version, which had Saoirse Ronan, Emma Watson, Florence Pugh, and also Laura Dern. Like, either of those versions are really good. It has been a minute since I read Little Women, and when I say a minute, give or take 15 years, so I can't talk to how accurate these adaptations were, but I do know that the feelings and sentiments that I recall from reading that book were also with me when I watched either adaptation of that book. It's a coming-of-age story about these sisters during kind of the Civil War and shortly thereafter in New England, and they are just, it's wholesome and cozy and heartwarming sisters who will, like, fight tooth and nail for each other, but who also will fight tooth and nail with each other. Sisters who depend on one another for support and just grow up being there for one another. And it's just such a sweet, sweet story. Very, very low stakes, but very, very, very sweet. And the only thing kind of questionable to me about the 2019 version is that all of the girls seem to be like exactly the same age, and I'm pretty sure there was a little bit more of an age gap. So that was my only thing there, but otherwise, just beautiful movies. Next is Tea and Sympathy, which is based on the play by Robert Anderson. And what is interesting about this is that they actually brought the Broadway cast to the big screen, notably Deborah Carr and John Carr, no relation despite having the same last name. And this is really a movie that takes on toxic masculinity in the 1950s, which feels very, very progressive to me. So in it, this 17-year-old boy who is attending an all-boys boarding school is hazed mercilessly by his peers and his teachers for not being quote-unquote a regular guy, which in the context of the movie means that he's not macho and doesn't have that bravado and all exhibit like all the bleh tendencies that toxic masculinity espouses. He's described as being very sensitive and into the arts, and at the same time this same young man has fallen in love with an older woman, the wife of the teacher who runs the house or dorm that he lives in. So it's just a very, very poignant piece. I watched the film adaptation many years before I went ahead and read the play itself. The play deals with homophobia very overtly, but that had to be omitted from the movie because of the Hays Codes at the time, which would not have allowed that to be put on the big screen. But I think that despite that, it's able to capture the very essence of the story, which is about the mental and emotional toll that this bullying and hazing can take on an individual, especially a young individual in this case, and both still tackle this toxic masculinity element. And there is the somewhat questionable relationship, well, not somewhat, the questionable relationship between the 17-year-old and the older woman. In the play, they're maybe 10 years apart, which doesn't make it better, but in the movie, the age gap definitely looks and feels like it's a bit more extended, but the acting is phenomenal, the staging is phenomenal, and if you like classic films, if you like plays, I'd recommend this one. Next is Anna Karenina, based on Leo Tolstoy's novel. Now, this novel has been adapted countless times, basically in any format you could think of. There have been tons of movies, TV shows, ballets, radio plays, you name it, this has been adapted to it. But the film adaptation that I'm talking about is from 1948. It's also in black and white and stars Vivien Leigh. Of the adaptations that I've seen, I feel like this is the one that stays the truest to the text, because it doesn't just zero in on Anna Karenina and Vronsky's affair. It gives these quote-unquote side stories about the different families that kind of are all somewhat interconnected in the novel, like Room to Breathe and Screen Time, so that you get the real sort of expansiveness of the novel itself. Also, Vivien Leigh, who played Scarlett O'Hara and who played Blanche Dubois, is kind of a queen at depicting these very passionate, somewhat emotionally unstable women. And she does, like Anna Karenina, such justice in this role. She's also stunning to look at, and the costumes are stunning as well. It's just a beautiful black and white film overall, and there were some really interesting cinematic choices that were made that just make this a beautiful movie. We're going to talk about a movie that's a little bit more recent, although not by much at this point, and that's Hamlet, directed by Kenneth Branagh. Now, this is the masterpiece that can be created when a Shakespearean actor directs and stars in a Shakespearean adaptation. This adaptation also starred Kate Winslet, I think around the same time as like Titanic fame, and this is just a beautifully like filmed version of a Shakespeare play. It stays true to the text, but it sets everything in the Victorian period, which generally I rather stay true to the time period, but the settings and the costumes and everything were just beautiful. The acting is really great, and what I loved about this particular adaptation is the way that flashbacks were used to basically show you scenes that were described in the play but wouldn't have been acted out in the play, and also to show things that might have been like implied by conversations but again not actually acted out in front of you. But Kenneth Branagh is a genius when it comes to Shakespeare. This just happens to be one of his many film adaptations of a Shakespearean play that I am particularly fond of. Next is Streetcar Named Desire. And my love for Tennessee Williams knows no bounds, but this play, this movie, they're iconic. Like, absolutely iconic. Even if you've never read the play, or seen the play, or watched the movie, I feel like almost all of us know that scene where Marlon Brando shouts. And so, as I mentioned, Marlon Brando is in this, as is Vivien Leigh from Anna Karenina that I just mentioned. She plays Blanche Dubois. But this is a film that was almost meant to be shot in black and white. There's something very dark and broody about the play itself that just lends itself to that sort of cinematography, and it is absolutely stunning. It is a play about this sort of fading Southern belle, Blanche, who ends up spending time with her sister and her brother-in-law, and kind of her mental deterioration and delusions and things of that sort. So it is a very, very dark and complex play, and the movie really lends itself to that. The acting is stunning. Vivien Leigh as this slightly unhinged Southern belle is flawless. Marlon Brando with his method acting as Stanley, this kind of Byronic brute of a man, also flawless. And it's just a great, great classic film again, a stunning adaptation of a play, and that's really all I have to say about it. This is the one movie on this list that I would say, like, if you have to pick one movie to watch, watch this one, because amazing. So we have 2 more to go, and the next one is The Night Watch, which I believe is a BBC production and is based on a novel by Sarah Waters, who is one of my favorite authors of the moment, and this is another World War II piece and features a sapphic romance. The story spans about 6 years, but interestingly, it goes backwards in time, so you start in 1947 and then work your way back to 1941, and over the course of the novel and over the course of the movie, you're finding out how the lives of the 4 main characters are interconnected, but each time jump essentially reveals a little bit more of how those connections really exist. And I personally liked how the film handled those like time jumps and made them visual. I also thought the acting was really good, and just overall liked the production itself. I think it stayed fairly true to the text, although not 100%, but again, this was something that I think captured the essence of the novel itself. And lastly, we have The Great Gatsby, which is based on, of course, the novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now, avert your eyes from the Mia Farrow adaptation, but feast your eyes on the Leonardo DiCaprio one, because this is a film that only Baz Luhrmann could have pulled off, but that soundtrack, those actors, the lush AF scenery and costumes, like, that movie captured the very essence of what we all hoped the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties were like. It's just fun and hedonistic and awesome, taking pop culture now and infusing it into this historical setting. But yeah, it's just such a fun film, great actors, great costumes, as I mentioned, just fun and vibrant, and it's given us so many gifs and memes that, I mean, how could it not be here? But yeah, I think it just captures the essence of the 1920s and, like, pumps it up a notch, and I just love that film. So yeah, those are just 10 of my favorite book to film adaptations. If you've watched any of these movies, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought of them as well. If there are other book to film adaptations that I should check out, certainly let me know those too. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!